Welcome to Connections, a podcast from the Graymere Church of Christ in Columbia, Tennessee. Our goal is to have discussions and messages that encourage us and strengthen our faith. We appreciate you joining us. Let's keep learning and growing together. Thank you for joining us for Connections. We try to have spiritual conversations that can be uplifting and encouraging. And I'm looking forward to our conversation today with Jesse Bates. He's the youth minister at Southgate in town, and thankful for that congregation and for all that they do, and especially his work. And I think we're going to have a conversation today that will help us focus on what we can do, not only to reach and encourage young people who are teenagers, but also young 20-somethings, those who are just starting out in the career and in the world, and kind of seeing what we can do to help them. So I'll start off by letting Jesse, you just kind of introduce yourself, tell us who you are and kind of what brought you into ministry.
Yeah. So once again, my name's Jesse Bates. I'm the youth minister at Southgate here in Columbia. Been doing youth ministry now for about 4 years. Was at Jefferson Avenue in Cookeville for 2 years, my home congregation. Been here in Columbia for about two. Yeah. Love my time in Columbia, love my time in Cookeville. What got me into ministry originally was my youth minister, Matt Collins, and other guys, Matt Suggs. Man, both those guys were inspirational to me. I just saw the work, really fell in love with what it meant for me in my life, and really thought that this is something that I could do, and dove in head first, and graduated from Freed in 21, and then immediately started working at Jefferson. So
awesome. Well, and one of the things that we've touched on a lot and have found in these conversations people are really interested in is what our teenagers need, what our young people need. And so I'm just curious, with you and your perspective in youth ministry, what have you learned about what they need, and what do we need to know about what teenagers are looking for?
Yeah, I'm actually going to reference my notes here. I left actually my notebook over there, so I'll go off off my head. Man, some of the things that have been super impactful to me, working with teenagers over the last couple of years, has just been how impressive teenagers can be when it comes to spiritual matters, when it comes to the way they think about their spiritual lives. They're very connected with the world around them, and they do view the world through spiritual lenses. Yeah. I think a lot of people think that teenagers somewhat are spiritually oblivious. That's not been my experience. They want to have conversations. They want to ask questions. They internalize things. They feel very deeply. There is apathy sometimes in teenagers, but typically that's not the case. They typically do feel things very, very much so, and they internalize that. Now, whether they know how to express that or not is a whole nother conversation. Yeah. But ultimately, when it comes to, I guess, the needs that I've recognized and seen, they very heavily desire a relationship and connection. And I think that's been something that I've seen at Southgate specifically, is every time we give them the ability or the opportunity to connect with people, whether that be older people, whether that be, the same age of their peers, they love that. They dive in. And I think that's where, to them, feeling that connection in that community is so vital. And there's a lot of struggles, that we've seen also. I don't know if you've read the book, The Anxious Generation, but that's been something that I think every youth minister, every parent should read. There's struggles with that. Mental health struggles, different things are more prevalent now just because I think we know more about them. But kind of navigating that, I think they want to navigate that well. The question is, how do we discern all the voices that are calling out in the world today with it? I think that's a lot of the things that we see with the teenagers.
Yeah, and you mentioned that book. I've heard Jonathan Haidt's interview on it, and my wife has read it, and I've looked at parts of it. I need to dive into the whole thing. But as you mentioned, it's really helpful to know how much of the world that they live in is working. And I like what I heard you say, too, about the fact that teens aren't oblivious to spiritual things, whether or not we can pick up on that. But I think that's probably pretty important for adults to remember, because have you seen sometimes people will have kind of a caricature of what they think, how they think teens are, or how they'll act and stuff?
Yeah, I think definitely people maybe who don't get to spend a lot of time with them, I think there are just kind of the stereotypes, right? And I think if you see snapshots of them and everything, and of course, social media again, works kind of almost both ways. If you don't spend a lot of time with the people that you're seeing kind of projected in one way, that's kind of your ideal with it. And it's really interesting when you really get to spend time with teens, just how really in touch they are with a lot of those things, and how much they are listening, even though from the outside in you may not expect them to be listening. The reality is they're listening and they're asking questions. It's funny. I'll have teens in our classes that sometimes I'm like, am I really getting to them? And then all of a sudden they'll come and they'll ask you a question about something I said 2-3 weeks ago, and you're like, man, so it keeps you on your toes. It really keeps you, but it's been a really cool thing to see and encouraging for me.
That's awesome. Well, and kind of related to that, one of the things I wanted us to talk about is another challenge that we have sometimes is knowing the best way to minister, not just to teenagers, but then those post-high school years, whether they're going into college or going into the workforce, and kind of that 20-something, especially those early 20-somethings years. And so you have experienced all of that, in ministry, but you've also seen the ministry aspect of things in trying to reach people in those situations. So what do you think people in that stage of life, what are their spiritual needs? What are they looking for from us?
One of the things that I think I've done some reflecting on that question here recently. And as a 20-something myself, 26 years old, I'm still kind of living through this as well. One of the things that it's been interesting to think about is my generation is kind of been one of the most, I would say, research generations recently within the church. You think about that of, we walked through Sticky Faith with our parents not too long ago, earlier this year. And it's a great book, and I think it's essential for youth ministers and ministry to read. But that book was written in 2015, and it was done studies of kind of my generation. Like that was when I was, junior, senior in high school, and talking about the generation just before me of why they weren't staying faithful. And so it's interesting when you look at a lot of the research we have now, a lot of those books are written about people my age, which is kind of funny to think about. And there are carryovers, but when we kind of look at how to minister to them, I was talking to my wife about this too, of, what are some of the best ways? And one of the things that she brought up that maybe I hadn't really thought about, simply because I'm just living in it right now.
Right.
20-somethings is such a broad spectrum of where you can be in life. It wasn't too long ago that I was fresh out of college. I had just got to a new job, and I had moved back to my hometown, but was not really home. I was living somewhere else. I was living in town. My wife got out of school. She was in graduate school in a town 2 hours from her hometown, trying to figure things out. But then I also had friends at that same time that had been just out of college, just got married, just started a new job. Give yourself 2 or 3 years. You're either starting a new job or maybe you're starting a family. There's so much that encompasses in that 20-somethings. And that's, I think, something that is so hard, I guess, to minister to that, because, you can minister to someone who is married, who has kids, who is single, who is starting a new job, who is maybe transitioning, who's moving to a new place. There's just so much needs there. And I think the big thing is just trying to find, okay, where do I fit in with this? It's kind of almost a transient time, unless, you come back home. And I think that's something that we're blessed with here in Columbia, is a lot of our people come back home. And so they kind of almost feel that place, but their place is not the same as it was before, right? And so trying to find that purpose, trying to find that place is something me and Emily have talked about a lot. I think one of the biggest things that churches can do, is to help in those transitional times. Exactly what that looks like is something that I guess is almost kind of need to need basis. I think every church wants to be a place that equips young parents, it equips young professionals and things like that. Making those things available, making those things known, really putting effort into those, I think, is a huge thing. People my age specifically, I think, are looking for community inside the church walls, but also outside the church walls. And so finding places that foster that is huge for people in kind of that such transitional time of just trying to figure it out, and listening to people who have lived more life to help that, I think, is a big thing.
Well, it's what you mentioned too about the the range of experiences is so powerful, because I know from the ministry angle or the ministry side of things, a lot of times you're, maybe without even stating it, you're looking for what's the strategy, the one thing we can do that'll hit everybody. But I think you're reminding us that there's not going to be one strategy that hits everybody, because the situations are so varied.
Yeah.
So a class that meets at the perfect time for people in one stage of life is not going to be real convenient for someone else, or those kinds of ministry aspects. When you talked about social needs that are not inside the church walls, but also outside the church walls, are there some ways or examples of ways that you've seen people searching for those relationships, maybe finding them, maybe places that are doing a good job of finding those?
Yeah. I mean, there's, I've been really blessed to see churches and be a part of churches that have done that really well. One example that my wife actually talked about is she joined our congregation's thing called Heartfelt Groups.
Yeah.
So it's a group of ladies who meet together. I think it's once a month. And last year they put all of the younger girls kind of together to kind of get them more familiar with each other. But this year she's actually put in a group with people from all different kind of stages of life.
Yeah.
People who have young kids, people who have older students, people who have raised kids and are empty nesters. And she really loves that. She loved her time last year with kind of all the people of the same age, finding that peer group. But she came home from it the other night and was just saying, man, it was so cool to just to hear people talk about kind of like where you are, but also people who have lived that, and kind of just there's a mix of experiences. And I think that's the big thing too, of just, I think churches that do this well realize that multi-generational and intergenerational are two different things. Having multiple generations in one building worshiping together is awesome, but if you can somehow work to get those generations to interact, that builds a deeper net, right? And that's the same thing we talk about in youth ministry. You want to have adults connected with teens that are outside of their parents, that are outside of youth ministry. I don't think that changes. Everyone needs a friend. Everyone needs somebody that they feel like cares about them, that loves them, that isn't, I guess, for a lack of a better term, supposed to, right? Kind of that idea of like, well, obviously the preacher, the youth minister, this person, that's their job. But if it's someone outside of that you build those relationships with, it feels different in a way. And I think those have been really cool ministries that we've really loved and taken advantage of. Jefferson Avenue started a program right before I transitioned here with their men, where we'd meet once a week, and it was just get together. I think it was called Wings and Wisdom. So they would bring wings to the building. Guys would come, hang out.
It already sounds good.
It
was
got
great.
Wings
involved.
Yeah, it was great.
I'm with you.
It was awesome. And they would have different men of the congregation. We were walking through a book, so it wasn't like a whole lot of prep or anything, but it was like, hey, we're going to read this chapter today. Will you lead the discussion next week? And it was, an hour and a half. And it was just a really awesome time of people coming together, and people look forward to that. And I think that's the thing of just providing those opportunities. You'd be surprised how many people take advantage of those things, who make sacrifices, move their schedule around, to have that common bond of Christians, even outside of the Sundays and Wednesdays.
Yeah. Well, and I love the comparison you had there of multi-generational and intergenerational being two different things.
Yeah.
I think that's so powerful. And
that's not original to me. I've seen that in Barna and a couple other places.
Yeah. Well, but I just, that really resonates, because it is easy for us in ministry to think if we're all in the same room, that box is checked.
Yeah.
When in reality, having opportunities to make those connections, that's going to take a little more intentionality. And you mentioned the heartfelt ministry, and I know everybody from Graymere who's listening is nodding along, because that's been a real blessing for our ladies here. And I think that intentionality is one of the reasons that it's such a blessing, is you're intentionally trying to connect with people. And as you mentioned, when you connect in those different age brackets, life situation brackets, that's huge. If there's something for those of us, speaking in life situation brackets, those of us who are no longer 20-somethings, and what I'm learning in life is you still remember what it was like when you were a 20-something, but things have changed a lot. And so the world doesn't look exactly like it looked then. And in fact, I think you could argue that our world is changing more rapidly than maybe even in previous generations. So what do those of us who aren't in that situation, like, what do we need to know? What do you think people in their 20s wished the older people knew?
Yeah. And I think I want to go back to kind of talking about the ministry thing. I think something that's kind of been resonating in my head as we talking about is from church ministry side, right? We kind of almost have to cast a wide net just because of the people that we're working with.
Right.
And I think that's some of the challenges with it. And the beauty of it is, you know, it's great that we do that. We want to provide those opportunities. But I think where it really shines is when the people who are in those nets take ownership and start kind of almost bringing more people into that, right? Yeah. We can't rely just on the wide net that's cast, but the people that are in that try to bring more people in and make it more intentional. So it is interesting, like the challenge of ministry. I don't think there's churches that aren't trying to do this better or trying to be more intentional with this. I don't think that's the case. I think it's just there are challenges within that, right?
Absolutely.
But when we talk about going into, I guess, the question that you asked of what do like people my age wish older people would understand, I think one of the things that I thought about as I was thinking about this question was just that we really do desire those connections. I don't think there's ever been a moment that someone older than me or you know, kind of in a different stage of life has reached out and said, hey, can we spend time together? Can we go grab lunch? Can we have you guys over for dinner? Anything like that. There's never been a moment that somebody has done that I've not appreciated. Yeah. Even in the moment of like, it's kind of a thing or a common thing, especially of just like, I really didn't want to get out or that wasn't in my plan or anything like that. But I've never been disappointed by saying, you know what, I'm going to go do this because it's always blessed me just with the time.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that, I don't know, maybe what I'm trying to say is, you're never being a burden when you're reaching out to somebody. You know, don't feel like you're putting them out or anything. The worst they can say is, hey, no, that doesn't work for me right now, but like, let's get together. I've, you know, that's been something too of just, I've never not appreciated somebody reaching out and saying, hey, I'm thinking about you. Can we spend time together?
Yeah.
Because those doors are open for a lot more different conversations. And we've had awesome conversations with people like that and just built relationships with people that I never would have had a conversation with, unless they did that, you know, just because, you know, you can kind of almost get sucked into your own bubble a little bit. And so I think that's a big thing of just, hey, people my age want those relationships. And I think it's in the context of those relationships that you can build those mentoring kind of moments. Lonnie Jones said one time, and I tell this to our students all the time of, hey, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care, right? Yeah. That idea. And how you build those moments is just exactly like what we're saying. If I know there's people who care about me and I listen to them better because I know they care about me, right? I'm more open to their advice that they give, because of the effort they've put into getting to know me and my family.
Yeah. And so it sounds like too, you're kind of encouraging us, those of us who aren't in the 20-somethings, to take the initiative, right? Not to be intimidated, because sometimes it might be intimidating from either side, right?
Yeah.
Someone younger might be kind of intimidated to say, I don't know, they're busy, they've got, and then someone older might be intimidated thinking, oh, they might not want to listen to me.
Yeah.
And so, taking the initiative is powerful.
Yeah.
When it comes to even just evangelism and the way we try to reach people with the gospel, what do you think that age group is looking for? What do you think we need to remember when we're trying to reach that age group?
Yeah. One of the things that I think has been really interesting when you look at research places like Barna and Pew, they both have recognized that there has been an uptick recently with people my age and younger, this generation, Gen Z, kind of your later millennials, Gen Z, even some of your later Gen Alphas. There has been a massive uptick in interest in religion and spiritual things.
Yeah.
Now that's a huge broad spectrum that people are casting. But I was actually reading just before I came over here, Barna in an article they posted recently said this is the first time, I want to say they said in like 15 years, that Gen Z and millennial church attendance has outranked that of some of the older generations.
Wow.
Which is like their number was like 1.9. So it still wasn't even weekly, but it was, somewhat bi-weekly, somewhere around there. Monthly church attendance has outpaced that in some of the older generations. So you have this almost swing that I think everyone is kind of sensing almost that people are looking for something. One of the things that I think I've noticed with teenagers and working kind of observing and talking to other people who do this, other youth ministers, is there seems to be less of this almost denominational loyalty, you know what I mean? Where someone can grow up in a certain church, but that doesn't mean that they're always going to stay there.
Yeah.
I think people in my generation and younger, especially those who maybe didn't grow up in a super strong church household, especially unchurched, doctrine is important, but maybe not as important as the community and the authenticity of how that church lives out their doctrine. That sounds so foreign to us who've grown up in the church, who are very tuned in with the doctrine, right? It's very important. And I 100% agree. But I think one of the things that, if we're talking about reaching out to people who are unchurched, who are in this generation, who maybe don't have this, they're looking more for the authenticity of how we live it rather than just preaching it, right?
Yeah.
That's something I've noticed, and again, research may point to, but kind of just my own personal observation is people who are unchurched will compromise maybe on some of the more traditional kind of gray area doctrines for a authentic community that they're seeing bear fruit, rather than just people who say, well, this is the answer, this is what we have, but they're not showing it, right?
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that kind of when you think about evangelistically, the best thing you can do is be authentic in what you believe, and be honest. Say, hey, we're struggling with this. We're not a perfect place, and we're never going to claim to be a perfect place. But we're following Jesus, and we're relying on His grace, and we're following what the Bible says. They're seeking answers. They're seeking a safe place they can ask questions. And I think what turns people away is when you just say, well, this is the answer. This is what you're supposed to do. And it's like, well, they want a place where they can have conversations and see what the Bible says about things. And so having a place that's safe, a community where they feel safe to ask those questions, but they're also seeing people authentically seek the answer to those questions, are a big thing.
Well, and I like the way you described that is what people are looking for. Obviously, we hope that if we spend enough time, if we teach the gospel to them, they'll care about the doctrine, but we also can't expect people who are unchurched to be concerned with that first because they don't know it yet.
Yeah.
Right. So we want to get to a point where that matters, obviously. But if you're thinking, what are they initially looking for? They don't know to be looking for that yet. They're initially looking for, can I see that relationship's there? And if we don't show that, then they're not going to listen to the rest of it. And so if our goal is we want them to listen to our message, then we've got to think through, all right, well, how does this look? And I think that's especially true with the generation that it seems like we're becoming increasingly more transparent to things. And so, I've noticed that if you look at sermons from years ago, for example, it would be really common for a preacher to say, if you'll permit this personal story, or if you'll forgive this personal illustration, because that just wasn't commonly done. It wasn't as prominent. But now, it's almost like the pendulum swung in the opposite direction. And so now, unless we're willing to be a little bit vulnerable and transparent and sincere, it's going to be hard for us to get a hearing.
Yeah.
So, because rather than turning people off, that's what's inviting people in.
But I also think it's interesting. I had a conversation with somebody recently. It was actually a lady at the bank. We were talking about something. I had to go do something with a church card, and we were sitting there talking, and she had moved here, and they had tried out a couple different churches. And one of the things that she said of the church that she's at right now is because of the preaching and how they do it. And it's very expository. Like the preacher would stay in one spot and really dig into the text. And so, while I say that, I know I just said people maybe don't care as much about doctrine. Right. The truth is, no, people are genuinely looking for the truth. They're seeking that truth. I think what really matters is how we package it almost, and really saying, hey, we're not trying to present you our version of this. It's like, we want to get you to Jesus, to the Bible. And I think that's what people are really looking for. And when they see that, that's where they really dive in. They're seeking the truth. They want the truth. And I think that's maybe if that kind of makes sense, kind of that sense of, I think there are times that maybe people are like, I don't want some tradition or some religion. They want actually what the Bible says. And I think that's what's so perfect about the position that we're in as people who are following Jesus and are Bible believing Christians. We have that. That's exactly what we're trying to do, is we're saying, hey, we don't really want to tell you what some other person thinks. No, we follow what Scripture says. We follow what the Bible says. We follow what Jesus says. We want to show you that. And that's a beautiful thing. And I think that's one of the greatest blessings we have when it comes to people who are seeking that, is we know it. We have it.
Yeah. Yeah. We've been asking people for a long time, let's just go back to the Bible.
Yeah.
And now you've got this focus. So taking advantage of that is huge. And so I appreciate you sharing a lot of these insights. I think they're helpful for us just to make sure we don't have kind of a one-dimensional picture of how things look, or, kind of a simplistic view of how things look.
Yeah.
As we think about this, is there anything else that stands out to you, or things we need to remember when trying to reach 20-somethings?
Yeah. One of the things that I think is just important, I guess, for me to say is I'm by no means an expert in this. I mean, I'm a 20-something myself.
You're expected to speak for every 20-something in this
right?
conversation. You're standing up for everybody.
I think it's, something that, again, these are just kind of observations that I've seen in my very short amount of time in ministry, in my very short amount of time of life. But something that I think is encouraging, that a lot of research has kind of shown, is there's really no like one smoking gun or like golden method of how to do this.
Yeah.
Which is somewhat discouraging in some ways, because if you're looking for the quick, easy answer, like, there's not one.
Right.
But it's also encouraging to say, hey, there's no really right or wrong way to do this, other than just almost, I would say, looking at how Jesus did ministry and loving people, fulfilling their needs, and making sure that while you're doing that, you're not compromising on the truth. There's never a moment. I think about John 8 with the woman caught in adultery, and this moment where Jesus shows this immense mercy, but he doesn't stop just at mercy. He tells her, the last thing he says to her is, go on and sin no more. This idea of, hey, we can still be warm and loving to people who are in broken situations, no matter what it is, whether they put themselves there, whether life has kind of dealt them a bad hand, whatever has put them there. You have this moment where there's this immense showing of mercy, but there's also this push to, hey, live better than this. Follow the truth. Sin no more. Don't put yourself back in this situation. Sadly, we don't know the rest of that story. We don't know what happened to that woman after that. But there is that incredible example of Jesus showing this mercy, and we see it time and time again. I think about the woman who walked in with Jesus dining at the Pharisee's house and washes his feet with her hair. Right. Again, that moment of mercy where everyone else kind of looks and stops and says, well, if they knew who this woman was, he would never allow her to touch her. But there's this moment that he has of, he sees her not for her sin, but for who she is, a child of God.
Yeah.
But also pushes her to see herself as that and to grow in that. And I think that's, again, that's what we want. And so showing people that is, I think, the best thing we can ever do, is just boil it down to get to that. There's a lot of different ways you can do that.
Right.
But if that's the main goal, then people will see that over kind of, I guess, smoke and mirrors kind of to get there. Right. So.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's just a powerful reminder for us of just those two obligations we've got, which is to show love and to reach out to people, but also to push all of us to God's standard and God's way of living. So I appreciate you joining us for this episode of Connections. Thank you all for listening. Remember to do all of the social media things like liking and subscribing to things that Chad is helping me learn my YouTube lingo of like and subscribe. But we do hope this has been encouraging for you. And if you're in the Murray County area and are looking for a church home, I know we've got a couple of congregations represented right here that would love to minister to you. There's an awesome group of Christians at Southgate, an awesome group of Christians at Graymere that'd love to help you any way that we can. And most of all, we just appreciate you spending some time with us in Connections. Thank you for being part of Connections. We hope it was an encouragement to you. If you live in the Columbia area and don't have a church home, we would love for you to worship with us. You can find out information about meeting times, classes, and what to expect at graymere.com. You will always receive a warm welcome from the Graymere Church of Christ.